Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which means it's time for a new How to Bass. Yeah, and today's a vocoder bass, which is not something I've done in a while. Been focused mostly on Harmer, like resampling stuff, and also FM, but today it's going to be Vocodex. So this is part one, where I'm just going to go over like the settings that made the sound, and then part two will be about all the how and the why and all that good stuff. So let's do that. So part one, this is a Harmer. That is the carrier. The modulator is these vocal samples that came from the packs folder. And then it's going into a Vocodex, being routed. 1 and 2 are routed into 3. And here's a Vocodex, and then there's EQ'd, and then it's Maximist. So let's look at the individual settings. The sound that I made in Harmer is a bit complex, so if you're more interested about why I did the things that I end up doing, then you'll want to go into part 2. So what this is what I call ultra low sound. I turned up the detune all the way up to 16, and then I set the pitch divider to 8, and then put the pitch down really, really low. And this still wasn't actually low enough to get it down to regular register, but this basically it does some fun things. But that's what I did. The main point of the sound is that I engaged unison. I've got an interesting unison pitch window that I had done here. I also went to local EQ and kind of messed with it a little bit. This is mostly set to taste. There's not really a lot of reasons for this stuff, but we'll talk about that in part 2. Now, A and B are both active. B, as you can see, is detuned up to 2, and it's also brought up a bit in pitch. This is to keep it in line with part A. This is basically a sub-reinforcement. It's unison. There's no change in the unison pitch window. As you can see, I have this point here because I started to, but then I decided not to do it. It's just, as I said, reinforcement. It's distorted with the rubber setting. It's a little bit of asymmetry on the stereo side. It's kind of a high setting on distortion. And then the compression is set as such. That's pretty much it for the sound. The part B is also low passed, which is basically keeping it to be a sub. I got the keyboard tracking on so that it's the same 4 harmonics active for every note, even if it's really high. That's what this does here. That's what the filter settings are for. And then the first one, there's no filter settings. It's just the unison settings set as such. And then it's distorted, and that's pretty much it. So that's the sound. That's the carrier sound. I'm playing it in the MIDI. This is the MIDI configuration. You can kind of hear it. Like F is like the first high octave, and then the E is the main. The E3, like the 3 area, is the main sort of low bass octave. And such. And so I told you about what the carrier is. These got let's see, did I pitch them down? I did not. So I actually, originally I tested these out by pitching them down here, but they are stretched. They are time stretched a little bit to make them longer than they would be otherwise. However, what you do to the carrier at this stage, or the modulator at this stage, is mostly up to you. Just what you think sounds good. So in the effects section here, I have an EQ on both of these, and they're both accentuating the high frequencies. This is the modulator EQ. And it's a little bit more complex. I attenuated these frequencies, kept the middle the same, but I also accentuated the high frequencies. So that's what I really wanted to bring the highs up. In Vocodex, what I've done here is I turned off minimum times. It's on by default. I turned it off. And then I put the attack and hold all the way off. The release up on as such. And I brought it over to the second release waveform type. Now, I also turned off draft. It's on the 4th order, 62 bands. The filter fatness is almost all the way off. By default, it's kind of on all the way, but this is almost all the way off. And then the bandwidth is rather far up on. And the bandwidth multiplier is towards the carrier, so it's a bit smoothed out. It's more saturated. And then the pitch is brought down a little bit. That's what it looks like. I basically brought down the low frequencies because I engaged the carrier to split through. With a bit of a low pass, so that means that there's a bit of sub reinforcement. That's what that does. So over here in the bandwidth, I have some specific settings for different areas of the spectrum. This is indicating that it's going to be less wide, and this is more wide. I'll explain a bit why I did that in part 2. Oops. We go to modular pitch depth. I'm also messing around with the pitch. Just because. I'll talk about that in part 2 as well. Damn it. That's all I'm doing here, I believe. Yes. And then, so I'm EQing it to accentuate the high frequencies. You notice how much accentuation of the high frequencies I did, and yet that's only how high it is. It should be clue you in otherwise. That's a problem. So in the compressor, I did a pretty basic limiting expansion. I brought it over so that like it's pretty much as much of a stable bass influence as possible on the low end. Same thing in the mid. With this one, I engaged a shorter release time, as you can see here. I also monoed the bass so that it's center stereo, and then in the mid, I expanded it a little bit so that there's a little bit of stereo. And then the high, I also expanded a tiny bit, but not as much. I tend to like to actually expand the mids more than I expand the highs, but I'll explain about that later. The highs have the same. Well, actually, this is I think the default release. No, it's the default release. It has less of a release in the bass, but more than the mid. And then on the master, I'm not compressing at all. Actually, okay, just turn that off. I'm using the self saturation to cut it off. So there's actually a little bit of distortion happening at the end point. It's interesting that there's actually a difference. I think it's because of this pre. Yep. There we go. Okay, so now that's the sound. I turned on the master a little bit because I'm streaming this live and it's a bit loud. Indeed. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. I use words. I use them all the time. Anyway, if you have any questions about any of this, the majority of them will be answered in part 2. But you can still ask them to me, and then I will still answer them, probably by linking you to part 2. So that if you have any questions, let me know, and as usual, have a nice day.